Whoa, did I just suggest that something about Joss Whedon's Justice League is actually better than Zack Snyder's? Sounds crazy, doesn't it? Well, I'm standing by it, and here's why. Now let's start off by saying that in both versions of the movie, this scene is crazy good and only a small section of what I believe is one of the truest iterations of Superman versus lower powered heroes I've ever seen. In terms of writing, yeah, this is pretty good. But that brings us to another question. If you have your thinking cap on, you'll notice that the writing is the exact same in both scenes. And if that's the case, what makes Joss Whedon's Justice League better at this particular scene? Well, there's only one clear answer. Music. Now I want to make to you all, my listening audience, a proposition, and here's what it is. Music in cinema can largely be considered a part of writing, and a very important part at that. And to support this, let's look at the Marvel Cinematic Universe, MCU for short, and the DC Extended Universe, DCEU for short, as it relates to musical choice and style. Now first off, let's note that in the MCU we have iconic themes all over the place, the Avengers theme being at the forefront of this. There are also some great themes that have fallen into the background, though fans love them and wish they'd return. Take Thor's theme for example, or even some of the music played for Iron Man. Point is that in the MCU, we almost always seem to have music that fits the movie and accompanying scenes and characters, even when the music is crazy like in Thor Ragnarok. Now let's contrast this to the DCEU. When we get to our beloved DC characters in the DCEU, what do we run into? Very unfortunately, non-iconic themes that no one remembers, except for outliers like the Man of Steel soundtrack, and also complaints that the music doesn't match well with the movie and its scenes or characters. And from personal experience, I can tell you that I felt this mismatch lingering very heavily in the first Aquaman movie, and not much in the second, so good on DC for improving. But with this contrast having been made, the difference between music and the respective cinematic works is clear. One is good more often than not, the other bad more often than not. But the question is, how does this relate to writing itself? And how is this mismatch created? Well, think of it this way. Every song or theme or musical piece tells a story. It is therefore the job of the director or writer to make sure that the music that accompanies a scene is telling the same story. Now let's actually bring this truth back full circle by bringing it to bear on our Flash vs. Superman fight scene and the accompanying music. But first, to strengthen my point, and give you all a sneak peek into what I mean, I'm going to play the two soundtracks in question so we can analyze them, but with no visuals. So with a black screen and having put on your listening ears, take a good listen to the soundtracks as they start and as they progress. Then tell me what are the first words you think of as they play. What emotions do they evoke? And what is the tone of the music? What is this music telling us? And please feel free to comment what you thought below to start the discussion. If many people comment, you may also find that there's a consensus about what each musical piece says. Alright, enough chatter, let's do it. Now before I do Whedon's version, let's dig into Snyder's a bit. And what I want you to do is keep the words and feelings associated with the music you heard in mind as we dig a little deeper into how this soundtrack fits the scene. Now considering Snyder's soundtrack, here's my answer to what I hear when I listen with no audio. In very few words, quick-paced rush into immediately jarring stop. Not sure what's happening there, but moving on there's silence, a bass drop of sorts, then lightly tense futuristic warping music. Then there comes a weird click, a tense swell, then it sounds perhaps like someone stands and someone falls. Then the quick-paced futuristic music picks back up. Interesting. Now let's go through this same music with the accompanying visuals. Now as Flash starts running, this sounds to me a little futuristic. Not quite a perfect fit as nothing futuristic is happening here, but it's an easy mismatch to make. especially since Flash is moving at super speed. Notice that the mismatch is occurring because the music is confusing running fast in the context of fighting an angry Superman versus running fast in the context of running into the future or fighting a futuristic opponent. The music also doesn't quite fit because Flash is not a hero who fights using futuristic powers. He is not a combination of Flash and Cable from the X-Men, he's just the Flash. Now let's move on. Next, there's this emptiness and warping that occurs as Flash approaches Superman in Flash time. Now with this piece of music, I must admit that it does have the good effect of drawing the viewer's attention as the silence lingers. You are waiting to see what happens next, and the music is waiting with you. This is good. Moving on, we hear this slight change in the futuristic music when Superman's eye moves. This is the little click I mentioned earlier, which is here accompanied by a small swell as Superman continues to turn his head to watch the Flash. This is good as well, especially since swells can very well communicate tension. Then comes a flurry of music that sounds to me like a response, almost like one person won and the other lost. Very fitting since Superman is throwing everyone to the side at the same time. Then the futuristic quick-paced theme picks up full force as Flash runs into a swinging Superman. Another thing I also notice, and you have to watch the full Snyder Cut fight scene to notice this, is that the music in this scene fits into the theme of the rest of the fight scene as a whole, appearing as a slowing down of the entire fight scene, giving you a glimpse into this other part of the fight that is very different, yet somehow still connected to the greater narrative of Superman versus the Justice League. Now I think I've been pretty good in giving this scene and its accompanying music in the Snyder version a fair analysis. So let's move on to the same scene in Whedon's version to see how it compares. Once again, I'm going to play the music with no visuals. So put your listening ears back on and get ready to think about the same things I said before. What emotions are evoked here? What is the tone of the music? What is the music trying to tell us? Alright, let's do it. Now once again, keep those words and feelings in mind as we dig a little deeper into how these soundtracks fit the scenes. And once again, here's my answer to what I hear when I listen to Whedon's track with no visuals. First, there's an abrupt stop to transition the prior music into a very light, trickling music. This sounds very interesting, almost like I've entered another world, one very mysterious and complex and otherworldly. But then this deep bass kicks in, and it suggests to me depth and power. In other words, this world isn't just some light, playful world. This world is strong, and perhaps even dangerous. Then there's this light warp that communicates something I don't really understand. Then, amidst the sound of what is perhaps splintering electricity, a different bass resounds. One that sounds like an answer. And I have to conclude that there are perhaps interactions going on in this strange world. Then, amidst a bit of warping, potentially futuristic but not really, comes this triumphant bass, like that of a hero in the midst of this chaos emerging triumphant. Then it goes into the next sequence. Now let's analyze this same soundtrack, but with the accompanying visuals. Now as Flash starts running, this sounds to me like a breaking into a different reality, and an entirely new world. Very fitting since this is Flash entering the Speed Force. The Speed Force is full of wonder and a sense of otherworldliness that I feel is captured really well here. Great music for the scene. But then this deep bass drop comes in to signify the power that the Speed Force carries. Very fitting since the Speed Force is unbelievably powerful and capable of empowering the user to insane feats like traveling faster than light and throwing infinite mass punches. Next there's this slight warp as Superman's eye turns. Awesome, now I know what that warp was for. Very fitting as the realization that Superman is keeping up is becoming known. Now note, the next part of the theme is Superman getting his own bass drop within Flash's theme. This, my friends, is powerful, and this is what the soundtrack should be doing, reflecting the reality that is happening in the script on screen through the music. What is that reality? Superman also has access to this world, and that is dangerous and powerful and scary. Note that Flash's face as he realizes Superman can track him reflects this truth. Then there's that triumphant heroic swell as he tosses the other heroes aside to deal with the Flash. Now with that analysis out of the way, I want to take the opportunity to really drive my point home about why the music in Whedon's version fits this particular scene better. And to do that, we have to consider this scene in the context of the entire movie, since that is where it will be seen at its strongest. Now considering the movie itself, the music up until this point has been fairly dark and foreboding as Superman has been dominating the other heroes. But as we enter this Flash scene in Whedon's version, the music changes dramatically, once again signaling a breaking into a new world as I mentioned before. But note that in Snyder's version, the music retains a dark undertone that matches the rest of the fight. Though the futuristic warping elements do set it apart a little, the dark undertone remains, even clearly heard in the music that plays when Superman throws the other heroes aside. Now this, my friends, is a key difference. Why? Because with this simple difference, Whedon's soundtrack becomes wildly more accurate. And this happened here because the truth is, we haven't seen the Flash try to fight Superman using the Speed Force yet. This is a new tactic. This is a new path. And the music itself points out that this is an opening to an entirely new reality, underscoring the power of said reality with that bass we mentioned before. In other words, the music is saying, this is powerful. This could work. Even though Superman is going to town on everyone, he may not be able to handle this. But then, we get another bass drop as Superman's head moves, confirming his ability to keep up. So the music is now saying, uh-oh, problem. Superman also has access to this world. This solution is an instant fail, especially since Flash has none of the other powers Superman has. Notice that Barry's face as he realizes Superman is countering his super speed reflects this reality. Now after this, what does the music do? It switches back to the greatness of Superman with a triumphant flourish. So finally the music is saying, Superman is still greater and his triumphant music must overpower that of the Flash. Now I'm not saying that all of the music in Whedon's version is perfect, or that Snyder's version has bad music. I'm just arguing that at this particular point and in this particular scene, the music in Whedon's version is more accurate to what is actually happening, and noticeably so, at least to the trained ear. Now to someone with an untrained ear, they perhaps won't notice that anything is really off, or they'll notice that something's off and they can't put their finger on what it is. They may even notice that one soundtrack is better than the other and not be able to describe why they feel that way. So to put a long story short, everything I just stated in this video is why those feelings of the music being off exist. This is why most of the MCU's music is highly praised, while most of DC's music leaves much to be desired. Your story needs good music, and your good music needs to be saying the same thing your story is. It needs to fit the characters in their brutality and violence and in the radical kind of threat they pose. Inspire the right emotions for what we and the characters in the movie are dealing with. Communicate emotion and depth of story. Communicate tenseness and suspense. And convey just how much trouble we are all in. When you learn to use your music to do these things and more, you start to compose music that is timeless. And just as a side note while we're on the topic of Spider-Man, please note that Danny Elfman was the lead composer for this theme and the Flash's theme in the Whedon version, which is what we just listened to.
Coincidence? I think not!
You also start to create music that defines an era. You create things that fit in the most elegant ways possible, or that become timeless nostalgia pieces for adoring fandoms. In the end, you start to realize that good music is everything.